Hi, Gerhard Bloom here, looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So it's just after Independence Day, and I want to offer a few comments here. I mentioned before, I think without question, the United States is the greatest nation to ever grace God's green earth. And I'm a Canadian. The values that Canadians and Americans share are near universal, but Canada does not have the guarantees of rights and freedoms that the citizens of the United States have. There is no country on earth that guarantees its citizens the rights and freedoms that are a natural right to every American citizen. And the rights in Canada are being seriously eroded by Justin Trudeau, and our politicians are, for the most part, standing idly by allowing this to happen. Fortunately, the Conservative Party is fighting back, but they're a minority, and our rights are being seriously eroded. And as in the United States, with the Biden presidency doing everything it can to undermine basic institutions of the United States. But what is even more distressing is that as the United States celebrates its Independence Day, the level of patriotism has declined, sharply declined over the decades. And this is an absolute tragedy that the citizens of the United States are no longer recognizing the value that the United States represents to the world and should to themselves. And in addition to this, rising feeling of shame or embarrassment over American history, which is indefensible. When you look at the United States and its role in the world, Americans have very much to be proud of. And the sins of the United States pale in comparison to the regimes across the globe, both currently and historically. Slavery, that was a universal institution. A universal institution, and the United States is supposed to be uniquely called out for this great crime. Absolutely insanity. Britain spearheaded the end of the global slave trade and was helped by the United States. The United States, as far as slavery goes, has every reason to be proud, right? Everybody else was doing it, and they stopped it. The United States and Great Britain ended the global slave trade. Although there's slavery in parts of Africa, in the Middle East, today. So as this is happening, as Americans no longer look up to their own nation, the erosion of the belief in God is happening concurrently. So you have a rise in atheism and this inability to see in the nation, the great values and traditions that it holds. This is leading down very dangerous paths. There were two great experiments in the 20th century to replace God, right? One, the communist revolution and the socialist cancerous idea that killed millions. This was a religion replacing ideology. It was absolutely toxic. And it was a religion. There was absolutely no evidence that you could muster that would convince the convicted communists, the convicted socialists, that this was an absolute disaster. Mass torture, mass starvations, murder, disastrous economies, absolute ruin. And the second was fascism, and the Nazi fascism. And yes, this was a religion replacing ideology. The Nazis coerced the church into conformity, but this very much was a religion replacing ideology, led to the death of millions. And once again, torture, murder, slave labor camps, and concentration camps. And so what does America's youth now have to look up to? The United States historically was long viewed as a Christian nation, It is no longer, right? Atheism is sharply on the rise, and young children, what have they got to look up to, right? They no longer look up to a supervening God, a moral God, and they no longer look up to their American history, the nation. And no, the nation is not the government. No, governments come and go. The nation is what endures, and what binds it is its traditions, its values, and its constitution. So you have this erosion of a belief in anything greater than themselves, right? And I've spoken of this previously, the clinical and dramatic rise of narcissism. Clinical narcissism. Jean Twenge, Narcissist Generation. I'm afraid I'm not certain of the title, but Jean Twenge talks about this sharp rise in narcissism. So what's filling the lives of today's youth? It's narcissism, this hedonistic generation. And how's that going? How well is that going? Or the sexual liberation, right? How is that working out? Well, we can see that clinical levels of depression and anxiety and suicidality are rising as the decades go by, right? This liberation movement has not made women happy, right? The sexual liberation has not made women happy. It has made them unhappy. Women are much less happier today than they were several decades ago, when they were, under the tyranny of patriarchal authority. This is a fact. And I may have mentioned this previously. Young men are failing to launch, right? They're failing to launch. They're doing poorly at every level of academic achievement. They're poorly on the job market. Young women are out earning and outperforming men across the board. And, great job for the women. They're succeeding, although they're not happy. They're not happy, but they are achieving success academically and monetarily. Young men aren't. This is a huge problem. It is also a problem when I check back. I hope you'll check back on my discussion of, atheistic rage, atheistic nihilistic rage. Yes, we had another mass killing by a disaffected young white male, right? This is atheistic nihilistic rage. This kid, at some deep existential level, realizes that this hedonistic lifestyle is utterly vacuous. And for him, in the absence of God and the absence of a nation that he could look up to, embarks on a campaign of wanton murder. And he doesn't care about your life, and he doesn't care about his life, right? This is atheistic nihilistic rage. This kid has been programmed by the society around him, by the educational system, that there's no God, there's no meaning inherent in the universe, a meaning that he has a role, a duty to help further, right? This is the Judeo-Christian message, that there's a moral meaning in the universe, and that we have a duty, an obligation to further that moral purpose. And the nation, right? That we have a bond of community and tradition and shared values, and that means something. Well, this kid has also been told by the schools that this tradition is uniquely guilty and sinful in atheistic terms, of course. So he has nothing to look up to. So this is atheistic nihilistic rage once again, and we can see more examples of this coming along, right? This will not end. Here's a paradox. In the 1970s, with just as many guns out there, far fewer restrictions on firearms, these mass shootings were virtually unheard of. What changed? This rise in atheism and the decline in patriotism. I spoke about religion replacing ideologies. This social justice movement is a religion replacing ideology, and it is cancerous. They're driven by this militant conviction that they have the answers to all of the life's questions. Everything about them is oppressive and racist and patriarchal, and they want to destroy every institution of Western civilization. The church, the schools, the education system, everything. And this kind of radical revolutionary fervor began with the French Revolution, right? Which, unlike the American Revolution saw the traditions that were British and saw that they were the product of centuries of evolutionary change, cultural evolutionary change, where the king once had, universal authority over life and death. And slowly, over the course of time, citizens were able to claim authority and freedoms from government, from the king, and then later from government. And the religious part of this equation is that these rights are endowed by God. They're not given by government. You are endowed with certain inalienable rights. The government has no right to take them away. For leftists, they have no respect for individual rights, no respect for individual freedom. They will stop at nothing, right? Absolutely stop at nothing to impose their tyranny. As with all of these revolutions, right? They believe they can bring heaven on earth, and they will turn over every institution to impose their vision of the good. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, heaven is what awaits you, not in this life, but in the next. That we live in a fallen world, and yes, we have a moral duty to further that moral aim and end, but there are limits to our abilities, and that's why we have a recognition that people are free to shape their lives according to their conscience and their sense of what's good for themselves, as long as that vision is consistent with the freedom of other individuals to live their lives. I was speaking to a very good friend of mine, and he took some offense to my referencing this woke ideology as a religion replacing religion. And I can see where people might take offense to that. The Judeo-Christian tradition is a couple of thousand years old in the case of Christianity, and long precedes that in the case of Judaism. There is a lengthy history of scholarship and serious inquiry, and the Christian tradition inherited a great deal from Judaism, right? The Old Testament is the Jewish Torah, right? The Old Testament and the First Testament is the Torah, right? And we share that, Christians share that with the Jews. And this was, you know, if you take an cultural evolutionary approach, you see this as a recognition in the common humanity of all of us. If you take the view that there was a moment in history, a unique moment in history where God identified himself to Abraham, this is the dawn of monotheistic moralism, right? There's a God, there's a one God. It's a God of all humanity, and he has a moral purpose that we have a part in playing. And it does not matter. I'm very much influenced by evolutionary theory. I do believe that God introduced himself to Abraham, that this was a stunning moment in human history. Prior to this God revealing himself, there were multitudes of gods, thousands of gods. And these gods, you may be surprised to find, were largely indifferent to your moral character or your moral behavior, right? Largely indifferent. They wanted to be worshipped, they wanted to be placated, but they did not issue anything on the order of the Ten Commandments. Killing, yes, killing the neighboring tribes, this was not murder. This was the way the world did business. For the Jews were given a nation, and God had told them explicitly to respect their neighbors and to live moral lives and to be a light unto the world, to spread God's message. At any rate, with the rise of this narcissism and the erosion of religious belief and the erosion in the patriotism in the United States, I see nothing but problems. Suicidality, anxiety, depression, murderous rages, and this poisonous social justice ideology that the explanation as to why people are gravitating towards this, otherwise intelligent human beings, spouting absolute nonsense, toxic nonsense. This is an effort to escape nihilism, right? The nihilistic despair. People need to believe in something. And I once again refer to my previous point about atheism does not scale. Atheists, yes, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, lead or led, moral lives, decent human beings by all accounts, but atheism does not scale. And when we see what happens when, these religion replacing ideologies replace traditional religions, it leads nowhere good. I do explore this issue and other very important issues at length in my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It's available on Amazon. I do hope you'll check it out. I believe it's an important work, not because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues are important. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.